Over the last few years, I've become fascinated by borders. These places where two economic systems, political systems, languages, ideologies meet and rub up against each other. And in the people that live along these borders and their views on the people on the other side and the people on their own side. And Rick, in one of his slides, showed perhaps the most important border that has existed in our continent in our lifetime, which was the Iron Curtain. And many of you will have had direct experience of it, as Rick's family has. 4 years ago, for the 20th anniversary of the 1989 revolutions, I decided to do a bicycle ride along that border from the north, the Baltic Sea, to the Adriatic. I wanted to see what it looked like physically today, but also what it looked like in the minds of the people that lived there. How do they reflect on it 20 years later? So I did that, and I wrote a book about it, a photographic documentary book, which I called Fragments. And I wanted to do something similar for the 20th anniversary of the end of Czechoslovakia. So I decided to get my bicycle out again and my camera, and I decided to do a ride along the Czech-Slovak border. It's a different kind of border, a border that didn't exist before and now it does, or at least it didn't exist on international maps. So over the next few minutes, I'd like to show you some of the things that I saw when I did that journey. Here is the border. Many of you will recognize it. It goes diagonally through the picture. On the north is the Czech Republic and the south is Slovakia. If you look at the top right-hand tip there, there's a little bit of territory which is Poland, and there's one end of the Slovak-Czech border there. And if you look at the bottom left, you see that's Austria in the bottom left corner, and that's the other end of the Czech-Slovak border. It's 252 kilometers long. In the central area, it's very mountainous. The center and the north, it's a very mountainous terrain, very green, sparsely populated. It's a very beautiful place. I know many of you will have been there and know it. If you haven't, I'd recommend that you go. In the southwest, it's more of a flat terrain. There's the floodplain of the river Morava, which forms the border. Different kind of terrain, but equally beautiful. So the first thing I had to do was, I decided to go from the Polish end in the northeast and cycle to the Austrian end of the border. So the first thing I had to do was to find the point where Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia meet. If I say I like places where two countries meet, the places where three countries meet are absolutely fascinating. Especially for somebody like me, I'm from the UK. We don't have anywhere where two borders meet. So I had to find that place. Luckily, it wasn't too difficult to find. It's well signposted. Many of you will understand what this sign is saying. You're 100 meters away from the tri-point, as they call it, where the three countries meet. And there's a sign to it because the three local authorities, the Polish, Czech and Slovak authorities, are trying to turn the site into a tourist attraction. So there are picnic tables and there are information tables, and it's a very pleasant place up in the countryside, up in the hills on the border there. And you might see there are three obelisks. I don't know if you can make them out, but one for each country. They're all new over the last few years. But what you can't see there is the actual point where the borders meet. That's a little bit hidden and it's not signposted. If you look at the bridge on the left-hand side of the picture, there's a stream underneath there, and we're going underneath that bridge now, and we go a bit closer in, and there underneath the bridge, hidden and not marked in any way, that is the start of the Czech-Slovak border. So I went and I touched that to symbolically start my journey, and I climbed back up from the bottom of the stream, and just nearby there's this border marker stone in the center of the picture there with the red top. That's also quite interesting. It's got the letter S on it for Slovakia. It marks Slovakia's border with Poland. But I'm not sure how clear it is, but just underneath that you can see etched into the border stone, you can see the letters CS or ČS for Československo or Czechoslovakia. So this is a recycled border stone. I don't know how much it costs to plant a new border stone, but Slovakia decided not to get new ones, and they used the old ones. They did exactly the same in the Czech Republic. All around the borders of the former Czechoslovakia are the same kinds of thing. Okay, so I started my journey from this point, and the first place I came to was a little town on the border on the Czech side called Mosty u Jablunkova, which many of you will know. And I came across this fella, and he's called Tomáš Sikora. He's a Czech, and the building next to him is a pub, and he manages the pub, and it's less than a kilometre from the border with Slovakia. So I started off on my journalistic enterprise, asking him questions. How do you feel about the Slovaks? How is life now, 20 years after the breakup, and so on? He said, I don't know. I never go there. I don't know any Slovaks. I have nothing bad to say. I have nothing good to say. I just don't know anything about them. I have no need to go there. And I thought this was very strange. He's a kilometre away from a place that speaks substantially the same language as him, and he claims not to know the place. But he's 30 years old, and so he was only 10 when Czechoslovakia broke up, and he said, I was a child. I don't really remember it very well. And so perhaps it's understandable that he doesn't really have an affinity with the Slovak side of the border. Anyway, a bit further on, I started to climb up into the hills. This is the kind of landscape and terrain that you get around there. And I stayed in a mountain hut, a chata, horská chata, again on the Czech side. And the lady who runs this is called Eva Hečková, again a Czech. And I spoke to her and asked her the same sort of questions, and she had a lot to say. And she's 10 years older than Tomáš, 40, and she says she still feels Czechoslovak. She doesn't feel Czech, she still feels Czechoslovak. She thinks it was a mistake to end Czechoslovakia. There's quite a few people along the border, at least, who feel that. So maybe that age, between 30 years old and 40 years old at the moment, is the point where the psychological break has happened between Czechoslovakia and Slovakia, or the Czech Republic. This place is an abandoned and disused border checkpoint. It's on the Slovak side near a place called Makol. In 1993, after the border came up, Czech Republic and Slovakia had to create all the infrastructure that goes along any border in Europe, or at least did at the time. It had to create border checkpoints. And this is one that it created after 1993. Of course, when Slovakia and the Czech Republic joined the EU, Schengen came along, 2007, the end of border control. So this building, God knows how much it cost, had about 10 years of service. Now, some of you will see it's for sale, na predaj. You can buy this if you'd like to, a former border checkpoint. So if you're thinking of relocating from Brussels, fantastic access to countryside, very good land communications to get there, unusual place to live, and unlike Brussels, absolutely no problem parking your car. Now, the next photograph, I have to warn you, contains some nudity. I warned you. I rehearsed this talk with a friend, and she said, you absolutely have to tell people why he hasn't got any clothes on. It was a very warm evening. I did this bike ride in the summer of 2012, last year. So it was very warm, even though it was the evening. And it's also a very isolated spot, and this man wasn't expecting anybody to be coming around with a camera. This man is called Josef Balázs, and we are standing right on the Czech-Slovak border. He is a Slovak, but he has lived on the Czech side for a very long time. Where we're standing there is a road across the railway line. The railway line actually is the first railway line that was built in 1888, joining what is now the Czech Republic and what is now Slovakia. And there's a road across there and a level crossing, a barrier that comes down to stop cars going when the trains pass. And Josef lives in the house that was the level crossing keeper's cottage. He doesn't do that job, but that's where he lives. So it's immediately on the border, but on the Czech side. This is his garden. So you see he's incorporated the border stone into his garden. He dries his clothes in Slovakia, and he has a picnic by the stream in the Czech Republic. That's not his only garden. He has a vegetable garden. It's 50 meters further down the railway line. Before 1993, it was a 50-meter walk from his house to get to his vegetable garden. After 1993, the border came down. If he wanted to go to his vegetable garden, which is in Slovakia, sorry, I omitted to mention that, he had to go to the main road. He had to go through border checks. He said he was sometimes frisked and underwent a body check. So with his passport, through the border control, back down to the railway line, to his vegetable gardens. Since 2007, he doesn't need to do that anymore. So he's very happy for Schengen. I'm sure he would come and thank the politicians here that made it happen. This shows again this wonderful green, verdant, mountainous landscape of the Czech-Slovak border. This hill on the right, in the centre, a bit closer in, some of you may know it. This is a very important place for Czech-Slovak relations. This hill, which now has a television transmission tower on it, is called Velká Javorina. Many of you may have heard of it or have been there. Since the 18th century, this has been a traditional meeting place for Czechs and Slovaks coming together in brotherhood. And they still meet there today, twice a year. In the summer, they meet, there's a big folk music festival. And then in the winter, on New Year's Eve, there's a big bonfire. And it draws thousands of people still. So this is a real focus of expression for those people who still feel that Czechoslovak identity. This is the top of the hill. And all along this plateau at the top, there are lots of monuments and tablets and things commemorating meetings of Czechs and Slovaks at this point over the years. Now, a couple of years ago, this one came along. 2018, Obnova Československá. 2018, restoration of Czechoslovakia, renewal of Czechoslovakia. 2018 is symbolic, or is important, because that would be the 100th anniversary of the foundation of Czechoslovakia in 1918. So it looks from this sign that there are at least a few people who are maybe not predicting, but hoping that Czechoslovakia will come back. I didn't meet many people who felt that would happen. But if that place, Velká Javorina, is a symbol of Czech-Slovak cooperation and coming together, there's a place quite close by that shows maybe a different side. It's a little hill called Jelenec, and on this hill, in the woods, there is this tower. It's an old military communications tower. It's now abandoned and unused, but if you're careful, you can still climb up it, and you get this view from about halfway up, back across to Velká Javorina and the television tower. And if you go up further, you get this beautiful view of the landscape of the Czech-Slovak border. And then you look down at the decaying buildings at the bottom. Now, many of the similar former military watchtowers around the borders of the Czech-Slovak Republic have been renovated, have been turned into observation towers for tourists. This one hasn't. Why not? Because the tower belongs to the Czech Republic, the land underneath it belongs to Slovakia, and so far there hasn't been any agreement as to what they can do with it. So there's some way to go, I think. This is a very boring photograph of a very interesting place. This is a village called Šance in Slovakia now, but 20 years ago it was a village in the Czech Republic called Usabotul, which many of you will have heard of. This was a place after the border was drawn in 1993. There was a couple of places along the border where the locals were not happy that they had been put in one country and not the other. There were lots of Slovaks in this village, and they fought to join the Slovak Republic. And it created a lot of tension between the villagers. It was a long-running news story in the early days of the independent Czech Republic and Slovakia. Luckily, there was a place further along the border called Sidonie, which had a little part of it which was in Slovakia, but which wanted to be in the Czech Republic. And eventually, sense was seen, and in 1997, the borders were redrawn. So now this village is in Slovakia, and Sidonia is completely within the Czech Republic. So the border used to be on the right-hand side of the picture, the right-hand side of the road. It now runs through the hills on the left-hand side of the road. And the tensions there are still palpable. I only found one person when I went through the village to speak to, and he didn't want to be photographed. He didn't really want to speak to me. He didn't want to give his name. He said, I don't want to say anything. It was such a bad time. Tensions ran so high. It was very bad, and I don't want to say anything that might bring up those feelings again. But it seems a peaceful enough place now. This is a sign outside the Czech town of Strážnice. Strážnice is famous for its folk music festival, and it's just a sign on the edge of the village saying, "Long live the unity of the Czechs and Slovaks." Nobody's bothered to take it away yet, so I suppose they mean it. What I found interesting was right on the opposite side of the road is a cemetery. And the sign above the cemetery says, "May you rest in peace." So, and this is directly opposite, almost anyway. So is it "Long live the unity of Czechs and Slovaks," or is it "May you rest in peace"? May the unity of the Czechs and Slovaks rest in peace. Well, we'll see. I'm sure it's the former. I said that in the southwestern part of the Czech-Slovak border, you have the river Morava, the floodplain, and the border goes right through the river at this point. Different kind of landscape, equally beautiful. It's this kind of floodplain forest, ponds, marshes. It's very nice. A bit further along the river, you see these two big metal arches. Again, the border is through the river. These are underground pipelines coming from Russia and taking gas to Germany. This is the Brotherhood gas pipeline. Underground, and it leaps out of the ground so it can jump over the border between the Czech and Slovak republics and then go back underground again. Now, I've been talking about the Czech-Slovak border being 20 years old. In reality, it's a lot older than that. The line of the border between the two has actually been settled for several hundred years and dates back to the time when Slovakia was part of the Kingdom of Hungary for 1,000 years, and the Czech Republic was part of the Austrian Empire, and before that part of the kingdom, or it was the kingdom of Bohemia and Moravia. So that line between them is a lot older than just a 20-year-old border. And what I was really looking for, my holy grail photographically, was to find a border marker somewhere along there from that period before the foundation of Czechoslovakia. And every village I went through, I said, "Do you know any old border markers, any old border stones?" And the answer was either no, or maybe there used to be one in the woods somewhere. It's maybe over there. I didn't find any until I was 20 meters, literally 20 meters from the very end of the border, 20 meters from my destination, and I found one. And this is it. This is an old border marker from the Austrian Empire time. So this is on the Czech side of the border in the floodplain forest. You might not be able to see the date, but it says 1755. So it's from the date of the Empress Maria Theresa, famous Austrian empress. So I got what I wanted. And as I said, that was 20 meters from the end of the border. So inevitably the next slide is going to show you the end of that border. The border here, the tri-point, is formed by the rivers Morava and the Dyje, and they form a confluence, and that's where the three countries meet. So I'm at the very tip of the Czech Republic here. On the left-hand side, across from the Morava, is Slovakia, and on the right-hand side is Austria. So right in the middle of the water there is the equivalent point and the point where the three countries meet. So that's just a short outline of some of the interesting things I found on my trip. There were a lot more. I spent the last few months putting them together into a book which I called The Velvet Border. There's a copy here for you to have a look at if you'd like. It's available only at a website called blurb.com, blurb.com. I hope it might be of interest. Thanks very much.